Good afternoon, Oneberg Nation, on our Oneberg Facebook channel and our YouTube channel. We have breaking news all over social media, all over everywhere, especially if you're in the Pittsburgh area. Quarterback Kenny Pickett traded to the Philadelphia Eagles for some swap of some draft picks. We are breaking in here on Oneberg. Brian Carruthers alongside myself, Ed Troop, to talk about it. We welcome your comments here on Wardenberg. What do you think about the trade, Brian? Just 48 hours ago on the Three Rivers podcast this past Wednesday, just a couple days ago, you and I talked about it. And we put a reel out there as well on Instagram and Facebook in which I said Russell Wilson did not come to the Pittsburgh Steelers to hold a clipboard this summer and this fall. You replied and said, well, then just get rid of Kenny Pickett. Here we are 2 days later. Omar Khan must have been watching the show.
Well, I want to thank Omar for watching the Three Rivers podcast. But look, this is a logical move. All joking aside, very logical move. Kenny Pickett, and, you know, if you love him or hate him or you still blame Matt Canada, whatever, Kenny Pickett could not deliver. It is a wasted first-round pick that the Steelers will never get back. And it turned out he's a baby. Everybody who challenged the king, if you even called him King Kenny, anyone who challenged the king, whether it was other teams, whether it was Tomlin, whether it was Russell Wilson, whether it was Mason Rudolph, they all beat the king. And so he's gone now. And I'm sorry to say, Kenny Pickett will go down as one of the biggest losers in the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Well, you got to think back to that Seattle game, right? When Mason Rudolph was named the starter, Kenny Pickett was healthy. And then there was all those rumors about how Kenny Pickett was not happy. He was not happy that he was just going to dress and hold a clipboard for that game in Seattle. And then a lot of us were kind of dismissing it. A lot of us Pitt fans out there, they were very loyal to Kenny Pickett, loyal to him being the first-round draft pick, the future of the Steelers at that position. Just kind of brushed that off and said, maybe that's not true. But now, man, I think it was pretty clear that that was true. Kenny Pickett was not happy that Mason Rudolph had replaced him, and he certainly wasn't happy when Russell Wilson just a week ago was named, traded for, rather, picked up, whatever you want to call it, picked up off free agency.
Whatever
Russell Wilson's
it was.
your next quarterback.
But look, Kenny Pickett was living a delusional life. It was almost like he won a game show. Who wants to be a starting quarterback? We pick him first round, where clearly he should have been like the highest, a second or third or even fourth round pick. We didn't need to do it. He was living in a fantasy world that he was better than he was. He got here, a lot of hype. He replaced Mitch Trubisky, a loser himself. And he got in there. He found a little bit of momentum in a few games, and he had some great preseason, spring game or whatever, summer camp moments with George Pickens that were exciting, and he did well. But once he saw the San Francisco 49ers at the beginning of this season, he had his oh shit moment that he's not good enough to be here. And now he's not here. And now he'll go on to be a forever backup quarterback or an insurance salesman in the next couple of years.
It's getting lots of comments here on Oneberg. We welcome your comments. What do you think of the Kenny Pickett trade to the Philadelphia Eagles? Please comment. Let us know what you think. We'll get to some of your comments as we go throughout here in the next 20 to 30 minutes.
But let me make one more point about Kenny being such a baby, and I'll stand by this. So living in this world of who wants to be a quarterback, and he basically won a lottery. It was a dream scenario. It was like a TV show that he got brought into, and he didn't know how to do it. He wouldn't stand on the sidelines and listen or even watch what Mason Rudolph would do. He wouldn't sit there. Okay, Matt Canada sucks, but he wouldn't sit there and listen to what Tomlin wanted to do. He wouldn't take anything from Mason Rudolph. And now we're finding he wouldn't even take something from Russell Wilson. So who are you going to listen to, dude? Levin Furniture? Great. Listen to them and show up and do your ad. But they don't want you anymore either. You got to listen to somebody, and you got to look, if you're not going to sit there and try to learn one single thing in your career in your second season, we got no time for you. And you saw Tomlin, man. He moved right on, hugging and kissing Mason Rudolph today. It's a beautiful day. And now we can get the immature, unprofessional people out of the building.
Yeah, I mean, this was a move that Omar Khan obviously, wanted to make here in the last couple of days. A lot of rumors out there swirling that Kenny Pickett was not happy with the Russell Wilson signing. And then they tried to play it off the other day. You and I talked about it on the podcast this past week. There was some report out there that the Steelers had reached out to Kenny Pickett for permission, basically, to say, hey, are you okay with this signing? Which I think was total bogus. And then they come back and say, Kenny Pickett said, sure, that's fine. Again, that whole story was far-fetched. We talked about it this past week. But here's the trade, man, for the Philadelphia Eagles. Here's how it goes down. The Steelers will get pick number 98 and two 2025 seventh-round picks in exchange for the Steelers' 120th pick this year, basically a third-round pick. And Kenny Pickett goes to the Philadelphia Eagles.
Well, what do you put value on? So in that pick, if and obviously it's big because it's a starting quarterback, and it's big here because it's Pickett.
Right.
That happened today between the Houston Texans and the Minnesota Vikings. You'd say that has zero impact on the future of the NFL, and no one cares about it. And that's the value they put on Pickett. You want to go? Go.
Well, here's the situation. Adam Schefter is reporting about this trade, got it out there, broke it. And he's comparing it to when Washington, what they got in return for Sam Howell. So they're basically comparing Sam Howell from Washington to Kenny Pickett. Very similar situation. But here's the new rumor out there that's fresh right off the block, man.
Wait, there's more rumor.
There's a new rumor.
Okay.
Did the Steelers acquire this third-round pick, number 98, to possibly now go and get Justin Fields?
Well, you brought my mood down a little bit because I was happy that Justin
here's the thing.
Over.
You can make first of all, let's back up for a second. There is only one quarterback on the Steelers roster right now, and he's brand new, Russell Wilson. Mason Rudolph signed with Tennessee this past week. Pickett's now gone. There's only one guy in that quarterback room, Russell Wilson. So they're going to have to go out and sign a free agent. They're going to have to possibly do a draft pick, maybe even make another trade for somebody. It'll be interesting to see now as we move forward. I still think Russell Wilson's your guy, right, going into next year. But who else is going to come in and get into that quarterback room?
The only thing that could go wrong now, Tomlin has righted wrongs and Omar Khan has righted wrongs. The only thing that could go wrong at this moment is if we make a ridiculous first-round pick for a quarterback and create a new controversy that we don't need. We're not good at controversy. We don't like when our fans cheer at us or chant things. We hear it. We don't love it. And we created that ourselves with Trubisky, then to Pickett. And we know we can't handle that. This is kind of like the divorce after a terrible marriage. We're out of it. Don't go on that date with that stripper again. It's not going anywhere. Move on. Get a center, get a linebacker, get something. Do not pick it. That's the only thing that can go wrong is making that first round or even a second round pick for a quarterback that fans might want to see now.
Breaking news here on Oneberg. I'm sure, unless you're living underneath a rock here in the last hour and a half, you are aware that Kenny Pickett has been traded to the Philadelphia Eagles in exchange for the 98th pick overall in this year's draft. The Steelers send their 120th pick this year, but the Steelers will get two seventh-round picks for what it's worth in 2025 from the Eagles as well in exchange to the Steelers' number one pick. How about that? The Steelers' number one pick from just a few years ago in Kenny Pickett, the Pitt product, now a Philadelphia Eagle, goes cross-state. And Jalen Hurts is there, so Pickett not going to be the starter in Philadelphia unless Hurts gets hurt.
And this guy, Pickett, is delusional. He doesn't want to listen to Russell Wilson. He doesn't want to listen to Mike Tomlin. He doesn't want to watch Mason Rudolph. He doesn't want to work with Arthur Smith. Who do you want to work with, man? Now your Hurts is back up. You think they're going to start chanting in Philly, we want Kenny? Why? To come in and throw 500 incompletions and no interceptions, and that's your highest ranking? And look, I kind of felt like this was coming. I don't know if you watched the Russell Wilson press conference today as we welcomed him. He talked about, and all they wanted to talk about was Pickett. And I will say that Russell was very, very good at working the media. So that'll be fun to watch coming up. But he talked about going to dinner last night or the night before he decided to make the decision, or I think it was last night. And he mentioned who was at that dinner: Cam, Connor, Mike Tomlin, James Harrison, Mr. Charlie Batch, as he called him. And we talked all about being a Steeler. And what was the one name that wasn't eating dinner with all those guys last night? Kenny frickin' Pickett. He's not part of the team. The alumni didn't want him. The current people don't want him. He's standoffish, and I wish him the best because I do like people who are standoffish. But dude, take a clue, man. It's over.
It was really surprising. Kenny Pickett, his rookie season, I think the Steelers went, 7-2 as him as the starter in the second half of the season. They went down to Baltimore. He won the big game down there at the end. He had a lot of momentum going into last season, and a lot of people, including myself, in training camp, he looked very good in the preseason.
Look great.
Thought he would take the next step, and he clearly didn't. Got hurt. A lot of people point back, man, when he got that concussion too, that just wasn't right after that. But something definitely happened. Kenny Pickett this past season was not the same Kenny Pickett we saw down the stretch of his rookie season. And for what it's worth, the Steelers lost confidence in him. Fans lost confidence in him. And now he's a Philadelphia Eagle.
I don't
know. The quarterback position.
His best game last season was when he beat the Raiders on Christmas night or Christmas Eve. And the Raiders
2 years ago.
So 2 years ago when he came when he was making that run, but the Raiders were a disaster and they were falling apart and we didn't really know it. So I don't know. I think Kenny Pickett will go down in history as his greatest moments were one-off passes to George Pickens at training camp.
We welcome your comments here on Oneberg. The breaking news: Steelers trade Kenny Pickett this afternoon to the Philadelphia Eagles. He is Brian Carruthers. I am Ed Troop, our weekly Three Rivers podcast on Wednesdays. And this past Wednesday, Brian and I are we're spiking the football a little bit in the end zone. And I know, Brian, you just reposted it on Oneberg a little bit ago, our reel of us talking about it just 2 days ago, that Russell Wilson was not signed to come in to be a backup quarterback. And you made the great point that just get rid of Kenny Pickett at that point. 2 days later, 48 hours later, here we are. The Steelers do, in fact, trade Kenny Pickett to the Eagles. Our good friend Chris Fletcher was commenting on here just a little bit ago as well. Big day for the Pitt Panthers. Aaron Donald also retired today as an LA Ram, and his Hall of Fame career comes to an end this afternoon. The former Pitt Panther and Penn Hills product, Aaron Donald, now retired as well. So a lot of former Pitt players making a lot of news today.
Yeah, good for Aaron. Great career, great Panther. And Kenny Pickett was a great Panther. But you know what? The question is, and what do we call this? What are we trying to learn from this as Steeler fans? And I think it's just a very common thing right now. And it's going to be something that's going to haunt us and probably until we're, 20 years older than we are now. This is life after Ben. And this could be a book that we write. And so the first chapter of Life After Ben, we didn't get it right. Tomlin brought in Trubisky as the bridge. Then they got crazy and said, well, let's draft Pickett. He's the guy. And then they started and they created their own quarterback drama between Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, amazingly, and Pickett. And what we didn't really realize was all three of those guys suck. We were in a QB controversy with three guys who shouldn't maybe even be second string quarterbacks. They might be third. So now we've got rid of all of that. Great move. We're going to press the reset button with a time-tested veteran. Let's see how that goes. But this is just life after Ben, and let's hope. And who cares? People talk about this Russell Wilson money that Denver's paying. I think it's fantastic, but why do we care what the Steelers are going to pay? If we have to pay Russell Wilson, if he does what he's saying he's going to do, which he's kept referencing is the seventh Lombardi for the Steelers, but wouldn't that be amazing if he did? But even if he has a great year and we think he has 5 to 7 years left, like he said today in the press conference, pay him. We'll figure that out. But this is right. The next step. This is our second stab at life after Ben.
So we got some comments coming here across on Oneberg. Our good friend Jason Messer says trade for Fields, sign Boyd, and draft some studs. I'm telling you, that's going to be the next rumor out there, that they're going to use this third pick that they got. They moved up to go to Chicago. That's about what the Bears are asking right now, a third or fourth round pick for Fields. You bring Fields in, maybe he
in this to say he doesn't want to come and be a backup.
That would be the only thing, right? Because he would clearly be coming to be a backup. So that would be the interesting thing with Fields. I agree with you, man. I can't see that scenario happening. But the Steelers have one quarterback right now, and they have two wide receivers in their wide receiver room with Pickens and Austin, Calvin Austin, the third. That's it. So they need to go find some wide receivers too. This offense is in a total revamp right now, but I'm excited about it, man, because this is an offense that struggled a lot last year, whether you want to blame Matt Canada, if you want to blame Kenny Pickett, If you want to give credit to Mason Rudolph for taking over the offense, they finally were able to score some points and win some games. But the bottom line is this offense really for the last couple of years has struggled, especially with trying to replace Ben Roethlisberger. So I'm excited about the Steelers offense 2.0 going into 2024, especially if they can go out and get a guy like Tyler Boyd from Clarendon and from Pitt. There's some other big names out there as well. And of course, this draft, some big time quarterbacks, wide receivers. I still think they got to get a center and an offensive tackle with their first 2 picks in the upcoming draft.
Well, there's a lot of work to be done. No one is discounting that. But I do feel like we got rid of one of our biggest problems, if not our biggest problem, is what to do with Kenny. And so now we can close the door on a lot of sad, dark, abused days as fans from last season. This means now we can close the door on Matt Canada. We don't ever have to talk about that guy ever again. That's great. Now we can close the door on Kenny versus Mason, Mason versus Mitch, all those guys. They're all gone. That's fantastic. I feel like a light or like a load is off my shoulders that those guys are gone. And now we'll start over. So the one thing it does put into play is for all the Tomlin haters out there, this does put into question how long you're going to let Tomlin play around for, because he's the last piece of this puzzle, him and Omar, I guess, that you can blame for there being problems. So what if Russell Wilson comes in and we win 8 games next year? We were made no progress. We won 7 games, or even make the playoffs and lose. Now, for all the Tomlin haters out there, you can finally say there's no one left to blame.
Right, it's go time. And I think that's what Art Rooney II in his annual postseason press conference that he did back in January, he made the comment that, we're tired of losing. We got to make some changes. We're tired of losing. I mean, I think a lot of people, a lot of Steeler fans, a lot of media kind of brushed that off like, okay, that's the president of the Steelers telling the people what they want to hear. But one thing is clear, my man, in the 60 days since, it is very clear the Pittsburgh Steelers are tired of losing.
And look, it's an all new team, man. This is fantastic. So if you didn't like what we went to Buffalo and did, and again, I never understood the people that were ready to crown Mason Rudolph and they wanted to pay him $10 million to be our starting quarterback. It made no sense to me at all. But if you don't like what's happening, this is great on so many levels. We have a new team to watch, new exciting action to watch, and Tomlin truly is in the hot seat now. So for those Tomlin haters out there, this is the best of both worlds.
Again, our breaking news, the Steelers trade Kenny Pickett to the Philadelphia Eagles in exchange for they swap 3rd-round draft picks this year. The Steelers move up from 120 to 98, and then next year they will get 2 7th-round draft picks from the Philadelphia Eagles. So, they swap picks. They move up, which is exciting as far as the 3rd round goes. 2 7th-round picks next year. They could end up trading those away. Not a huge deal.
Pickett.
What's that?
Why do you think the Eagles want Pickett?
It's a great question, man, because you got Jalen Hurts there, I guess, as a backup. I don't know who else is in that Philadelphia quarterback room across the state. I'd have to look it up. I'm not sure who else their backups are, but I have no clue. I mean, because Jalen Hurts isn't going anywhere. I mean, he's an MVP quarterback.
Not going to compete against Hurts, right? I mean, he's going back up. That's how much he hated being in Pittsburgh. So for all the people who said, give Kenny a second chance, he's a great guy, he's a Pitt guy, he gave up being a backup to a good quarterback. You'd say Russell Wilson, right? You'd still say he's a good quarterback, to be determined, right? But he's time tested to go and be a backup to a good quarterback. So he there's something not right. He either hated the situation and everyone took a dump on him. So I get it. But man, it really shows how much you hate that situation. Before you'd be the backup to the Steelers, you'd rather just get out of town and be the backup to the Eagles.
My good friend Chuck checks in. Hey, Ed, I can't believe all the moves the Steelers are making thus far. I'm excited for the upcoming season. Chuck, I agree with you, my man. It is exciting to be a Steeler fan right now because they're finally going for it. And I think you and I talked about it, Brian, this past week. This is very un-Steeler-like, right? I mean, in all the years of free agency, They never went for it. They never made these trades, really, up until they trade for Mika Fitzpatrick a few years back. I think it was 2019 or 2020, somewhere around there, 2019. That was the first really big trade that they made, other than Jerome Bettis, right? They traded for the bus, which, back in 1996 or something. But outside of those two trades, they don't trade. They don't go pick up free agents. They draft. They build those draft picks. After 4 or 5 years, they move on and they reload. But that scenario, and you and I have talked about this, that equation doesn't work anymore in today's NFL. Still works a little bit, but you can't rely. You have to make moves like this if you want to compete. Look at all the successful football teams in the NFL over the last 5 or 6 years. And I think Art Rooney finally had a, coming to Jesus moment, if you will, maybe with Tomlin and Omar Khan this past season, said, hey, look, guys, we got to change the way we think. We got to make some moves. And clearly they're doing that. I'm excited as well for the upcoming 2024 season.
And now we're going to have a new controversy to talk about. Now that Pickett's gone, which, by the way, I think is a fantastic thing. Get all those guys out of here because nothing worked right. But now the question is going to be, and we'll spend all spring, we'll probably spend the draft talking about it. We'll probably spend all summer until you get to the opening game, which is, who is the real Russell Wilson? Was he the product of a loser Denver team that he couldn't get along with the coach, and he's a prima donna and he didn't want to be there, and a little bit of operation shutdown? No one had faith in him. Remember that first year they took that field goal where he made all that money and they went for the field goal on his debut night and they lost that game. They didn't keep the ball in his hands. This will be really interesting. At the press conference today, Russell said that that's not who he is, that that's a blip in time, and look at the complete product. But now we're going to have 6 or 7 months while I watch every baseball game to think about who is the real Russell Wilson. Who do you think is the real Russell Wilson? What do you think you'll see on day one?
I think we're going to see, I don't think we'll see the Seattle Seahawks MVP Russell Wilson, but I don't think we're going to see the worst of Russell Wilson that we saw 2 years ago. Really, he had a good year last year in Denver. If you look at his numbers, you look at some of the stuff that he was able to do there, especially in the second half of the season. He looked more like the Russ Wilson that everybody always thought he was in Seattle. But I think it's probably somewhere in between, man. I don't think he's as bad as he looked at times in Denver. He probably won't return to that MVP status. But the Steelers, as you and I talked about this past week, they don't need him to be that MVP candidate in Seattle. We just need him to play better than what we saw from Pickett and Trubisky this past season. Look like Mason Rudolph or a little bit better, which I think he definitely will. I think he'll definitely be that type of quarterback here in 2024. I'm pumped, man. I've been watching some highlights of Russell Wilson the last few nights. And just the way that he scrambles, he keeps the football, runs downfield, and then just throws it up as well on the run. Throws it downfield. How about that? He throws the football downfield, something we have not seen since Ben Roethlisberger.
You've been watching old clips of Russell Wilson all week?
Well, in my defense, man, it's posted on.
Everything okay at home? Has your wife left?
No, everything's good. No, watching them, but from other people posting them, 2 or 3 highlights here and there.
Oh, okay.
I haven't gone on NFL.com, which I probably could, and look up some Russell Wilson highlights.
Not a bad.
What an exciting week! This caps off one of the probably most exciting weeks in Steeler offseason history. I cannot remember an offseason week in which, and really you go back to when did they get Russell Wilson? Was that last Thursday or Friday? I think is when they got Wilson.
It's funny, man. It's like you go on these whirlwinds. I feel like we got him like 20 years ago. Like, has he only been a Steeler or in town for a week?
I think it was a week ago with Russell Wilson, and then this week, of course, the big moves with Patrick Queen. They go out and get him. Deontay Johnson gets traded to the Carolina Panthers. And now today, Kenny Pickett gets traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. The Steelers only have one quarterback on their roster right now, and it's a guy that's never worn the black and gold.
I am interested to see. I think it will tell a lot about the kind of professional, not a person. I'm sure he's a great guy. But as a professional, I'm really interested in hearing Kenny's first interview. Maybe it'll be here on One Burger. If you're watching, Kenny, I know your wife watches me. She's a big fan, but it would be great I can't wait for that first interview because I want to hear what his take is. Now, maybe he'll go professional and just say, I wish those guys all the best, this, that, whatever. But someone's going to ask him a question that's going to strike a nerve. And it would be interesting on who he blames. And would it be himself? Would he blame the fans? Would he blame Tomlin? Would he blame Matt Canada? Who's to blame in this when you're Kenny? He's not going to blame himself. So
Right.
who's to blame where he'll say, this is the reason? And I think an easy one is Matt Canada. I blame when I eat too much ice cream at night, I get on the scale in the morning. I blame Matt Canada. When my wife's mad at me for not taking out the garbage, I just blame Matt Canada. Canada is a great scapegoat for all of Pittsburgh to blame everything on. And I think Kenny, if he's smart, his PR team and whoever else will say, blame Matt Canada. Everybody else is still in the league and will matter.
Well, it will certainly be interesting to see what the future of Kenny Pickett will be as he moves forward. Career backup, out of the league in a couple years, or will he resurface and become a starting NFL quarterback and thrive? He's young, man, only 2 years under his belt. Any of those scenarios I just presented could happen, and it'll be interesting to see.
And I don't think he did Pittsburgh dirty. I think he, as a person, was available. I think he did every charity event he could. I think he embraced the city. He was at Pirate games. He was at Penguin games. He wanted to be all in. He embraced the city, I think, in a really nice way. It just comes down to, in professional sports, you got to win. So if he's butthurt that he was booed off the field and people said, don't come back. And then, he was amidst rumors of like, he didn't want to play under Mason and wouldn't go on the field or wouldn't dress. I get it, man. But like, you did everything extracurricular. Cam Hayward does a great job too for all those charities, and we reward him with the NFL award, the Peyton Manning or the Walter Payton Award. That's great, but if you don't win and if you're not productive, you're gone, unfortunately. But I wish him well, and I do think he did everything he could in Pittsburgh, but win.
I agree, man. I agree, and
his wife on Instagram. I hope she doesn't dump me.
Hopefully she stays a fan of yours and Wunberg, right?
That's it.
Final thoughts on the big breaking news from this afternoon. Just about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago, coming across that the Steelers have traded Kenny Pickett to the Philadelphia Eagles. They swapped third-round draft picks this year. The Steelers move up from 120 to 98, I believe, in the third round. And then the Steelers received two of the Eagles' seventh-round picks for next year in 2025. But final thoughts, my friend.
I mean, if I'm an Eagles fan, I'm thinking this is the best that we have going on this offseason after that epic collapse. We've lost Jason Kelce, and we've picked up Kenny Pickett. Where are we going this season? A lot of questions over the other side of the state. So if I'm an Eagles fan, I'm thinking I hate my life. It's happened again. We're getting crapped on. We're Philly, which I do enjoy. As a Pittsburgh fan, I think this is positive. Getting all these people out of the locker room from these last 3 seasons is so good. And I'm optimistic. For the first time, I feel like I'm optimistic about the Steelers.
Yeah, a lot to be optimistic about some of these moves they've been making. Omar Khan, who had a great draft last year, now in his first full offseason that he's going into, making some huge deals, trades, free agent pickups. And I'm anxious to see what he does in this upcoming draft, which is just about a month away.
You said this same thing last year. We praised Khan last year, said Khan, and we sucked. Is Khan on the hot seat? That if this run around doesn't work, what if Queen's no good? What if Watt and Queen can't figure it out? Porter Jr. slows down. Russell Wilson's a bust, and we look at Tennessee, and Mason Rudolph is lighting it up. He gets in because there's an injury. Is Khan on the hot seat that he has to deliver finally on some of these things?
Well, sure. I mean, I think the shelf life for an NFL GM head coach anymore, other than Mike Tomlin, right? I mean, he has all these non-losing seasons that we tout him about all the time. But in all seriousness, no, if you're new into a GM role, any type of leadership role, from coaching all the way up through there, your shelf life is probably only 3 or 4 seasons, right? To get it right. If you don't, you're gone. The old way of bringing in leadership that's going to stay in these positions for a long time and see it out is probably over. Everybody wants wins. They want results right away, and Steeler Nation is no different. But I don't know, man. I think Khan is pulling all the right triggers right now for the Steelers in that front office. I thought the draft was great last year. I think we're probably on the ahead of them having another big draft this year. I think they go offensive tackle, center with the first 2 picks, and then they go get a corner and wide receiver with the 3rd and 4th pick. So the first 4 picks of the draft, I think will address 4 key positions that they need. That's going to do it for our broadcast here this afternoon. Make sure you tune in every Wednesday here on Oneberg for the Three Rivers podcast with myself and Brian there on the other side. There we go. And Brian, tomorrow, real quick, why don't you pimp it, the St. Patrick's Day broadcast?
That's right. We'll be live in the city, 2024 St. Patty's Day Parade, brought to you by our friends at Ireland Contracting. So we'll be excited to be with them tomorrow. We'll be there live starting right at 10 o'clock. Myself, Todd from the Sandwich Show, the big man, will be there, and we'll be talking to everybody. So if you see us run over and scream into the mic, you'll be on.
Thank you, everyone. Make sure you tune in tomorrow to the St. Patrick's Day broadcast with Brian, and tune in to us next week here on the